Oh, we talk about samsara, and actually, it's not like there's just this one samsara, is it? Everybody has their own samsara. I mean, quite literally, we all have our own samsara. I'd know that. So then we talk about escaping samsara. You get quite a strong image of like that now samsara is over there, now you've gone somewhere else, which of course is not the case, just a question of your own individual change, transformation, and then everybody else still has their samsara. I don't know if it's particularly an important point anyway. It's just, when you're thinking about bodhicitta, and so the main thing with bodhicitta is the great compassion, which means thinking of each and every single other sentient being. So each of them have their own unbearable ocean of samsara that when we meditate on bodhicitta, like constantly, repeatedly, sort of, bringing up that thought again and again and again, so it becomes stronger and stronger and more habitual that what we need to do, what we really need to do is to free all of those sentient beings and to achieve enlightenment in order to be able to do that. So each one of those samsaras, that each sentient being is unbearable. For them it's unbearable, and we have to, what we're trying to do, right, when generating bodhicitta, generating great compassion, is to bring the sort of, bring it to that kind of pitch of also finding their samsara unbearable. We find it unbearable. We find their samsara. We find them being still in samsara unbearable. One's kind mothers. take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. The foundation of all good qualities is the kind and perfect Guru. Correctly following the Guru is the root of the path. By my clearly seeing this and applying great effort, please bless me to rely upon the Guru with great respect. When I've discovered that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once, it is extremely difficult to find again and is greatly meaningful. Please bless me to unceasingly generate the mind, taking its essence day and night. This body and life are changing like a water bubble. Remember how quickly they perish and death comes. After death, just like a shadow follows the body, the results of black and white karma follow. When I have found definite conviction in this, please bless me always to be conscientious in abandoning even the slightest collections of shortcomings and in accomplishing all virtuous deeds. When I have recognized the shortcomings of samsaric perfections, there is no satisfaction in enjoying them. They are the door to all suffering and they cannot be trusted. Please bless me to generate a strong wish for the bliss of liberation. Through my being led by this pure thought with great remembrance, alertness and conscientiousness, please bless me to make keeping the individual liberation vows, the root of the teachings, my essential practice. Just as I have fallen into the sea of samsara, so have all mother transmigratory beings. By my seeing this, please bless me to train in supreme bodhicitta, which bears the responsibility of freeing transmigratory beings. Even if I develop only bodhicitta without familiarizing myself with the three types of morality, I cannot achieve enlightenment. By my seeing this well, please bless me to keep the vow of the sons of the victorious ones with fervent effort. By my having pacified distractions to wrong objects and correctly analyzed the meaning of reality, please bless me to quickly generate within my mind stream the unified path of calm abiding and special insight. When I have become a suitable vessel by training in the common path, please bless me to immediately enter the holy gateway of the fortunate beings, the supreme of all vehicles, the Vajrayana. At that time, the base of accomplishing the two attainments is keeping my vows and samaya purely. When I have gained effortless conviction in this, please bless me to protect them even at the cost of my life. Then when I have realized exactly the vital points of the two stages, the essence of the tantric sect, and I'm enjoying the yoga of 4 sessions with effort, without being distracted by non-meditation objects, please bless me to accomplish these according to the teachings of the holy beings. Thus may the virtuous friends who reveal the noble path and the spiritual practitioners who correctly accomplish it have long lives. Please bless me to pacify completely the collections of outer and inner obstacles. In all my lives, never separated from perfect gurus, may I enjoy the magnificent Dharma, and by completing the qualities of the grounds and paths, may I quickly attain the state of Vajradhara. It's funny how we have to do all of this study, isn't it? I mean, actually, this part of the text, it talks about that a little bit, but it's kind of strange. But then, if you don't, then what do you do? Actually, it's a bit like maybe the reason I'm thinking about this is because of that's what's happening in the text at the moment. It's like if you don't study, then what you're going to meditate on? If you don't study, how are you going to know whether what you're meditating on is like really going to get you where you want to be? In other words, how are you going to know what's true and what's not true? How are you going to know what you're doing is true and not untrue? So anyway, well, let's see what Lama Tsongkhapa says about that. So we've already started with the wisdom, and then we've got how to generate wisdom in one's mind stream. And as I mentioned, as we noticed last week, the way he approaches it anyway, let's put it this way, is like, this is the benefit of having wisdom. This is what goes, the drawbacks of not having wisdom. Mainly he's talking about that. So then you want to develop wisdom, and he doesn't say, maybe he doesn't really say anything about how to develop wisdom. Just why you need to. Okay, so did the first bit talking about how to generate wisdom in one's mind. First of all, the drawbacks, not drawbacks, the advantages. So you got that quote from the 100 verses on wisdom by Nagarjuna, which shows that it's the root of all qualities. Makes sense, doesn't it? Because any quality you want to develop, you need to know what that quality is and how to do it, and what knows how is the wisdom. So without the wisdom, you wouldn't understand the quality, you wouldn't know how to develop that quality, and in fact, you probably wouldn't have even heard of it. Anyway. So then a little bit, maybe a paragraph on how it is that it's with wisdom that a Bodhisattva is able to keep going without sort of freaking out. Whatever's going on, whether things are difficult or whatever's happening. So yeah. So in fact, that talks about how with wisdom, then you know how to practice, or how it talks about how wisdom helps you to know how to practice the other perfections, and how they sort of profit. How it affects them, how it improves them. That's what I was trying to say. So anyway, we finished there. So then there's the next bit is about how with wisdom, then things in the Buddha's teachings which might seem on the face of it to be contradictory, kind of the Buddha contradicting himself, but with wisdom, then you see there is no contradiction. Like, I don't know if it says that here, but anyway, like the standard one that I've heard mentioned several times, a doctor. You go to the doctor, you're ill, the doctor tells you you should not eat meat. If you eat meat, it's going to really make things worse. Then sometime later, tells you, oh, you absolutely should eat meat. If you don't eat meat, then that's going to be difficult for you. It's going to help you. If you eat meat, then it's going to help you to recover. So giving you two contradictory, apparently contradictory, or on the face of it, contradictory, advices. But when you consider that at that time, with your body in that particular state, the meat would have harmed you. But now you've changed, and so you actually need it. That's the example I give. I don't know. Then I can't think of a sort of an example from our lives where you get that happening. Maybe on the stock exchange. It's buy, then sell kind of thing.
I have an example.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I had chronic fatigue for 30 years,
Yeah.
and the doctors kept saying you need more exercise. And when I exercised, I got worse. So it was now I need exercise, but when I was sick, it actually made things worse for days
Mm.
afterward. There's an example.
Yeah, so that was yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. So the time when whatever the not so much what the doctor said, but what you did not need for a certain period was exercise, and now you need the exercise. So yeah, it's the same idea, isn't it? Yeah. Hmm. That kind of thing. But anyway, let's see what it says. It's similar idea, but yeah, maybe a bit different. So those endowed with wisdom can accomplish without any contradiction two excellent qualities that appear to be opposed. So now some examples. So these, so the first one isn't seems to be a bit separate. Were a Bodhisattva to become a universal monarch with power over the four continents, the minister of wisdom would prevent his succumbing to the sway of desirable objects. So here, okay, so this is talking about the Chakravartin kings, which I don't know, we don't seem to have those these days. Four continents. So this is what do you call the classic Buddhist cosmology where we live is called the southern continent, and then you've got the other three continents with Mount Meru in the middle and so on. So according to that cosmology, it's possible to have kings that rule over all four of those. So the point is becoming somebody very rich and very powerful. So you know how we have that saying, I think it goes like power corrupts, and a lot of power corrupts a lot. So like for us, it looks like if you were to become really rich and really powerful, it'd be very dangerous, because you might even assume if anybody gets into such a situation, it's definitely going to corrupt them. So that's the idea of being contradictory. So being a good person and being also really rich and really powerful, contradictory, because anyway, you get the idea. Whereas for a bodhisattva who is completely you know dedicated to being a service to others, they would, the power of their bodhicitta and the power of their wisdom, the power of the wisdom being that they would see that even though they have this power, it's ephemeral, they have the wealth, can't take it with you, they understand karma, so they have no interest in using it just for themselves, and to harm others. So in other words, through the power of their bodhicitta, their compassion, through the power of their wisdom, knowing what's right and wrong, they're going to use that power and that wealth to create, good karma, to do good in the world. So you get the idea, right? Not so much that they are contradictory, but that they could seem contradictory. So then the next sentence says, likewise, although his love that sees sentient beings is as likable, likable, yong. We have the talk, in the 7 cause and effect instruction, there's the one which says something about love. It's that one. I've often called it heartwarming love. There's maybe another one, affectionate love or something like that. It's love to. It's not the love wanting all beings to be happy. It's the love which is a kind of like just an affectionate mind. So whoever you see, you feel that kind of affection for. So anyway, likewise, although his love sees that sentient beings are as likable, is very strong. So they have that very strong, that kind of love, very strong. It is not even slightly mixed with attachment. So we talk about the difference between love and attachment, and in fact, it's quite difficult for one's feeling of love towards others and compassion towards others to be pure, in the sense of not being mixed with attachment. Not to speak of being mixed with just plain ignorance, really, where you feel really sorry for, anyway, you feel compassionate for somebody who's visibly suffering pain, but not feeling compassion for all of the other sentient beings who are still stuck in samsara. But then, more to the point here, for most of the world, when you love somebody, there's going to be an element of attachment, more or less. So here, this is talking about the bodhisattvas. The emphasis here is on wisdom, but anyways, because of their wisdom and because of their compassion and so on, their bodhicitta, and those feelings of affectionate love won't be mixed with attachment. So how would the wisdom help in avoiding your feeling of affection for others becoming mixed with attachment? Let's think about that for a minute, and then maybe we can talk about it, try and think of an answer to that. So, did you get an answer? I mean, it could simply be, with the wisdom you understand the the drawbacks of kind of like engaging in the world with attachment. Because think what attachment means. Here, we're not talking about any kind of. We're using attachment in a particular way, and he's using attachment in a particular way, which means a sort of like what you might call grasping attachment, like self-centered attachment, right? So, well, it would be a more or less thing, wouldn't it? Because perhaps, if even as a bodhisattva, perhaps if you're a new bodhisattva, then there could be more tendency for the feelings of affection to be mixed with attachment and selfishness. But it wouldn't be sort of like I was much less doing much less damage than it would for us ordinary people. But anyway, yeah. So maybe just that, just understanding that if the if the attachment gets in, then it's going to create just a whole lot of trouble for oneself and from others and for others. So the wisdom would understand that. Then, so that one seems to be about loving kindness. Then, although he has lasting and intense compassion that cannot bear the suffering of sentient beings, he is without the laziness that is oppressed by sorrow and that does not delight in virtue. So what could happen here, you see, is the Bodhisattva has that kind of compassion, very enduring and very strong compassion that cannot bear the suffering of the sentient beings, like any sentient being, any and all sentient beings. Now, for us, I mean, besides the fact that maybe not having that kind of intense and enduring compassion, but anyway, when we think about the suffering of sentient beings, it to some degree that compassion can arise. Maybe it arises quite strongly, but there's quite easy for it to also make you feel discouraged. So, in other words, thinking about the suffering of sentient beings just makes you feel miserable, makes you feel unhappy. In fact, it seems quite strange to say that when you really have great compassion, which finds the suffering of sentient beings unbearable, and which is completely focused on the suffering of sentient beings, that you would be happy at that time. So this is something we definitely talked about, and for me, I think the only answer I could think of is that with there's a tendency with the Bodhisattva, as one progresses with one's great compassion, that the emphasis is more on, I'm going to free these sentient beings from their suffering. And that the compassion where you're thinking, I'm going to free them from their suffering. That would be something quite quite joyful, wouldn't it? You know, like in the four limitless thoughts, the way it's the sort of long form. So how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings could be free of suffering and its causes. Well, they're already, you're sort of like you're making your mind a bit joyful, not just thinking about the suffering of sentient beings and thinking how awful, how awful, how awful, and maybe feeling quite miserable, and maybe even feeling sort of like miserable because you have this feeling there's no end to it. That it's impossible to free all sentient beings from their suffering. Just feeling discouraged like that. But anyway, so how wonderful it would be, and then not just how wonderful it would be, but developing that and thinking, may they be free of suffering and its causes. So it's like on top of the how wonderful it would be, like really strongly wanting it to happen, but not having yet quite taken responsibility. So that comes with the third step where you think, Daigi Jiao, so I myself alone, I'm going to make that happen. I'm going to free them all from their suffering. So it's based on that joyful thought of how wonderful it would be, and that joy would just get stronger. So looking at it from that point of view, you can see how meditating on compassion isn't necessarily going to make you feel miserable. But in any case, looking at this again, although he has lasting, intense compassion that cannot bear the suffering of sentient beings, he is without the laziness that is oppressed by sorrow. So the thing is, if you, for us, it's like contradictory, developing compassion and having what you call it, joyous effort, because for us, maybe from our experience or maybe from our understanding, if you think about the suffering of others and really take it seriously and so on, and you find it unbearable, then that could make you feel kind of like just down. It says sorrow anyway, sorrow nyangin. Sorrow makes you, fills you with kind of like, fills you with grief. You just have the grief. So the grief takes over. It's like the meditation on compassion becomes a meditation on grief. And then being overpowered by that grief, which is an unhappy mind, it's not a joyful mind, right? So then it's a mind of laziness, strictly speaking, because laziness isn't just being bone idle. It's the mind which does not delight in practicing virtue. So you're not delighting. You don't have a mind delighting in practicing virtue because your mind is just filled with that grief and misery at the thought of their suffering. So you see the two things that are supposed to be contradictory, right? Compassion and having and being able to practice joyous effort. But with the wisdom, you wouldn't make that mistake. Because that would give you understanding where you wouldn't make that mistake. I mean, that's what I think, anyway. Then next he says, although he possesses immeasurable joy, he is without the restlessness that distracts the mind from a focal object. So I was thinking this was true with the four immeasurable thoughts, but I'm not quite sure now because. So, what's contradictory? So the mind needs to be at the same time joyful. So there's no reason why that we couldn't say that what that means is the joy is to do with the joyful effort without restlessness. So the point is, it's like how can your mind be joyful and stay focused? Somehow the joyful mind is a mind that's sort of like buzzing and moving and somehow staying, it's not peaceful. And so you, an unpeaceful mind, how can an unpeaceful mind remain one pointedly on its object? Can you see how that could be, a bit of a problem? Could be an issue. Although he possesses immeasurable joy, which, reading between the lines, although he possesses immeasurable joy, which should make the mind very restless and very difficult to remain one pointed on an object, he doesn't have that. And that's because of the wisdom. So let's think about that. Not sure about that, how that works. You can see how you would think is contradictory, but how does the wisdom stop it from being contradictory? All right. So, anybody got an idea, an answer? Yeah, I'm not sure. The thing is, depends how you. Yeah, you have to think about what it might mean. So it says he possesses immeasurable joy. So I think if I think about trying to develop concentration. Oh, okay, Michael.
Well, maybe because when we feel that immeasurable joy, our minds get very active and can just move from object to object.
Yeah, I think
Maybe,
the only thing is you said if we get that joy. I think that joy would be the joy of the immeasurable joy of the Bodhisattva. And I think that you're right, but I want to take the that out of it. For us,
Yes.
Like the only kind of joy that we have is always associated with somehow being excited.
And also, I think a lot of us mistake pleasure for joy. Do you get what I mean? Like when we're having a
Yeah,
pleasurable experience, we're like, oh, that's so joyful. And then our minds get excited and just move around searching for those pleasurable objects.
yeah, that's so joyful. Anyway, you think you're enjoying yourself. I really enjoyed that. The thing is, anyway, also it says immeasurable joy. Anyway, I think it's that's about it really. It's the I mean, if you approach it from the other end, like if you think about, well, if you want to if you wanted to focus your mind, you would feel like maybe the main thing you need is somehow the mind needs to feel peaceful, and somehow joy doesn't seem to go together with the peaceful. So it's actually difficult to imagine, really. So he possesses immeasurable joy. So the thing is, let me have another look at this. I can't find the page. Because it says immeasurable joy, and we know very well that of the four immeasurables, there's one which is called immeasurable joy, right? So I want to see if it actually says that, because that might have been, it might be that it actually says immeasurable joy as in the four immeasurables, and that might have been what made me think this is to do with the four immeasurables, even though it doesn't actually say explicitly that it's about the four immeasurables. Just a moment. Sorry about this. Yeah, that's the second one, third one. Daniel Chimbo. Kawatseme. Kawatseme da deyan. Semipaldi. Yeah, it literally does say immeasurable joy, using exactly the same words that we would when talking about the four immeasurables, immeasurable joy, which is one of the four immeasurables. So in that case, that immeasurable joy, it might not be talking about that one. It might be just be talking about joy, which is immeasurable, like a huge amount of joy. But if you said it means the measurable joy, as in the four immeasurables, what does that mean? In the long version, it's Senshin Damji Toredan Tabeterat. Yeah, so basically, the happiness that sentient beings are experiencing, may they never be separated from that, isn't it? Senshin Damji Toredan Tabeterat. Yeah. Yeah, so in the short version, it just says, may they never be separated from whatever happiness they've achieved. So the point is, anyway, it's a joyful mind. It's a mind which is filled with joy at the happiness that others, sentient beings or maybe even enlightened beings, are experiencing. Yeah. Anyway, let's carry on. Maybe there's something to think about. So then, although he possesses great and continuous equanimity, he does not neglect the welfare of beings even for an instant. So one thing is when it says great, let's see now, just just an idea, but when we talk about, well, there's a difference between compassion and great compassion, isn't there? You can have compassion just for one person, and it can be just a particular kind of suffering. Whereas, like, great compassion is all sentient beings and for all of their suffering. So it's it's a mind that understands suffering very clearly. And so anyway, yeah. So that's the great, so we talk about great loving kindness. Similar, for all sentient beings, and wanting them to have not just sort of some kind of or short-term, let's say, worldly kind of happiness, which is not real happiness, but mainly wants them to have the happiness of enlightenment, and also all sentient beings. So great equanimity, even though I never heard of it before, but here it says great and continuous equanimity. So great would be equanimity that extends to all sentient beings, and also all sentient beings. I can't think of any other meaning that would have anyway. All sentient beings. So, and then continuous. So not just like fleeting, but all the time, always living within equanimity. So then, despite that, he does not neglect the welfare of beings, even for an instant. I think that was quite easy, isn't it? I mean, don't you sometimes wonder how you can have equanimity without having a sort of what's the word? Yeah, it's almost like you have the feeling that equanimity would mean having a mind which is like neutral towards everybody, like kind of like a passive mind towards everybody. You know what I mean? So instead of attachment to some, almost as bad, almost like this, instead of attachment to some and feeling angry towards others, then just not, and not just not caring about others, just being neutral towards everybody. What's the word I'm looking for? Somehow distant from everybody. That's not what I'm looking for. Anyway, do you know what I'm talking about?
Is it detached?
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay.
That's what I was looking for. Yeah. So it's quite easy to get those two mixed up, equanimity and equanimity towards everybody, and just feeling detached from everybody. It's almost like the only way to overcome the attachment and the anger and so on is to withdraw completely. So, in other words, if you don't have the wisdom that understands really what equanimity is, then you could easily, your meditation on equanimity could easily lead you to just sort of neglect everybody. So keeping your mind kind of like neutral towards everybody, right? So that's what I think anyway. And this is all owing to wisdom, because wisdom eliminates the obstacles to accomplishing a balanced strength. Teda top sunsu, top sunsu, trubi, kekshir, kobichir. Yeah, anyway. I don't know. Balanced strength. Balanced. I'm not really quite sure what that's trying to say. But in any case, we get the idea, I think. You know, it's things which you could struggle with, wisdom helps you to understand, so it all fits together. Okay, should we carry on? Yeah, good. I think that's a yes. Then the next bit's talking about how with wisdom you're able to reconcile the two truths. So the praise of one worthy of praise. No, I've heard of that. I'm not quite sure who it's by. It might be actually Nagarjuna again, but not 100% sure. Oh, okay. Actually, I've got notes in my this book here. Now, I'm going to do so. Actually, it's Ashvagosha. Ashvagosha, right? I think he's the one that was, if I'm not mistaken, the one who was a really famous and accomplished Hindu master who got into a debate with some great Buddhist master. I don't know if it was like Aryadeva or Chandakirti, one of those. And so the Indian master won. And so somehow the Hindu master, I don't know if he had a different name then, but anyway, this one here, somehow he ended up being closed up in a library, maybe under house arrest or something. I don't know. It seems a bit, you lose a debate, so you get put in prison in a library. So, and he was a great scholar. So, you know, of course, he's the kind of person that likes reading. So he started reading his way through the books in the library. And he was, obviously he was impressed, but also apparently in one of the texts he read, there was a prediction about him. And so anyway, he became, he converted to Buddhism, and he became a great Buddhist master. So anyway, Ashvagosha. I think he's the one that wrote the 50 verses on the Guru. Ashvagosha. So anyway, obviously he wrote this to praise of one worthy of praise, and you can tell from the title a little bit. You know, it's like this is praise to the Buddha, but not just to flatter him or something, but praising him because he's worthy of praise. But anyway, in this text, it said, they accord with conventionalities without discarding ultimate reality. So praising the Buddha, although it says they, I don't know. So anyway, this is anyway talking about the idea of being able to to see how the two truths, conventional truth and ultimate truth, fit together. And you do need wisdom for that, because I mean, you know, it's I'm thinking we talking about this last time actually, but anyway, it's very easy to think that if things aren't and don't exist from their own side, that they can exist at all, because not existing from its own side, when you go into that a bit, what it means is you can't find it in its base of imputation. So there's this thing that appears to exist over there, but then when you look, you can't find it. So how can something which you can't find be seriously said to exist? So it's very difficult to see how it could be empty and exist. In other words, how it could be empty of existing from its own side, empty of true existence, and at the same time exist conventionally. So this kind of like difficulty in reconciling two truths. So Lama Tsongkhapa's explanation says, thus there is no need to discard ultimate reality, the great certainty one has gained that not even a mere particle of the referent object whose signs are being apprehended is established. So you don't need, when you're making the point that things do exist conventionally, in other words, they do exist. I mean, if something exists, the only way for it to exist is conventionally. Otherwise, you'd have to be saying existing truly, but nothing exists truly. Nothing exists from its own side. So anything which exists conventionally. So you don't actually even need to say conventionally. I mean, the very fact that something exists means it exists conventionally. That's the only meaning it could have. So, so when you're saying something exists conventionally, you don't have to discard its ultimate truth, which is that it doesn't exist from its own side. That is not contradictory to, but in agreement with the fact that conventionalities are found through conventionalities are found through a profound certainty that individual effects arise from their individual inner and outer causing conditions. In other words, it's not that easy to see, but what Lama Tsongkhapa is saying is that within the sphere of ultimate truth, within, in other words, not existing from its own side, cause and effect and so on work like clockwork. They work perfectly. And in fact, when you start going into these teachings, in fact, it's like nothing would function if they were not empty of existing from their own side. In fact, this is one big thing. I think originally it comes up in Nagarjuna, if it's not, and I'm sure also Chandakirti, where he makes the point, all of those things that all those mistakes which you say accrue to me because I see nothing exists from its own side. You say, if you say there's nothing exists from its own side, therefore there would be no three jewels, no four truths, no karma, and so on. All of that actually does not accrue to me, it accrues to you because you say things do not exist from their own side. So, although these are grossly contradictory for those without a sharp mind, so if you don't have a sharp mind, then you think that, what are you talking about? How could they exist conventionally if they don't exist from their own side? If they don't exist from their own side, that means they don't exist at all. And in that case, how can you say that conventionally they exist? None of that's going to work. So for those who possess wisdom, they are compatible and not contradictory. Then the same text says, so this text by Ashvaghosha, I have to make a note of that. Ashvaghosha, actually, the Loban, Dayang. Ashvaghosha means Dayang. Damjin. Ashvaghosha. Yeah, okay, so, the Ashva, Da is horse, and then Gosha is like melody, so the young is melody. So I don't know how he got that name. Yeah, anyway, that's what it means. So that's Ashvagosha. Otherwise forget. Same text says, regarding permissions and prohibitions, some of your words are definitive, whereas others are not. Still, there is no contradiction among them. Yeah, this is the one where I was saying it's like they give the example of the you should eat meat and you shouldn't eat meat, or you should exercise and you shouldn't exercise, right? Thus, there are many contradictory permissions and prohibitions in the higher and lower vehicles and in Sutra and Tantra. At the same time, they are to be practiced by a single person. Those without a sharp mind who seek the meaning of the countless scriptures see these two as contradictory, whereas the skilled do not. This too is owing to wisdom. So I'm not sure about that, but it seems to be saying that you've got certain things which are taught in the sutra, which are complete opposite from the tantra. So it looks like contradictory teachings, but actually the person who's practicing could be different, or it can even be the same person, like with the eat meat, don't eat meat. When they're at a certain level, then there are certain things they should not do, but then when they advance, then they should do it, should do exactly the same thing. Okay, so far so good. Shall we think, a couple of minutes? Maybe sort of meditate a couple of minutes. So then it talks about the drawbacks of not having wisdom. I suppose it's very obvious in the like political arena. You listen to one person talking, it's like, oh yeah, that sounds good. You hear somebody else saying the complete opposite. Oh, that sounds reasonable. It's I mean, it's quite difficult to have the wisdom that can really make the judgments, isn't it? And it's actually also like that with the religious teachings. I mean, even within, let's say, well, anyway, let's say Buddhist ones, people who are on the surface of Buddhist teachers. I mean, how can you tell? They some people have this very nice way of talking, and they make you laugh. Maybe they make you feel good. I mean, to be honest, I've heard of people that I know who've gone to listen to a certain teacher, and what they mainly seem to have the main thing they seem to come away with is somehow listening just made them feel good, but not quite sure there was really anything of substance. Didn't seem like there was anything of substance. That's what you want, really. The thing is, you think of something like Lama Yeshe, especially Lama Zopa. I mean, Lama Yeshe much longer time ago and didn't stay for so long. But many of us know about Lama Zopa, and I mean, he was just hilarious. He was just hilarious. He was so funny, and that is good actually, because I remember one of my teachers saying how it's good when people laugh a bit because it wakes them up. Somehow just talking, people get bored and maybe start falling asleep, especially after lunch. So people laugh a bit and they wake up a bit and they sort of enjoy themselves. But for sure, Lama Zopa was not just a joker. He wasn't like that. But making people laugh was one of the things that he did. But anyway, my point is, just laughing, going to a talk where you laugh, or even one where the teacher says things that make you feel good, even though that might be an important part of it, but when that's kind of all that you got from it, then it's not much use. Yeah, in fact, I know one teacher, amazing teacher, but even another teacher of mine, who's a student of this same teacher, was telling me, like, he's not like other teachers, he's to listen to, he's not very interesting. And when I listened, I knew what he meant, because he tended not, this is one teacher who tends not to make you laugh. And his way of talking is it's kind of like, in a way, quite monotonous. But he's just fantastic. Really fascinating to listen to. Because clearly speaking from experience, and just everything, just about everything that he says is, you're kind of like learning from. You're gaining in knowledge about, how to practice and what the Buddha taught. So that's really the main thing. And so the thing is, if you don't have the wisdom, in fact, this came up, didn't it, in earlier on, after talking, after Lama Tsongkhapa talked about the kind of qualities you need to look in a teacher. It also talks about the qualities of the that you need to have as a student, and one of them is the ability to be able to distinguish between a good teaching and a bad teaching, which means one where the teaching the teaching makes sense and it somehow conforms to what the Buddha taught. You need to be able to do that. And anyway, you need wisdom. If you don't have the wisdom, then you'll just sort of like be led by the nose anywhere, by anybody. Maybe because they've got a nice looking face, maybe because they joke a lot, maybe because, I don't know, telling you you're enlightened already, you don't need to worry, that kind of thing, which may be a big relief. There's nothing to do, everything's already there, that kind of thing. Meanwhile, so separated from wisdom. Now I'm thinking, I might not be able to get to the end. Let's see, because I remember reading this and thinking I'm not sure I really have much to say about this. Separated from wisdom, the other five, generosity and so forth, and the view will not be pure. There'll be something missing. I think the thing about the pure is there'll be something missing. It won't be complete. The Compendium of the Perfections says, I can't remember who that's by. I think we came across it before. In those who strive for results in the absence of wisdom, their giving does not purify, will not be pure, I think is better. Their giving will not be pure. This is not to do with purifying, as in purifying negative karma. Will not be pure, won't be complete. It was taught that the best generosity is to benefit others. The rest only serves to increase wealth. So, seems to be saying, when you combine the generosity with wisdom, then you get generosity which leads to the best results. Whereas if you don't have the wisdom, then it's still generosity, but all it will lead to is wealth. We were talking about how, I think it came up in this class, maybe another one, you can, even if you've got a bad motivation, practicing generosity will still lead to wealth, but everything that goes with it will be missing. In other words, you've got to have the generosity with morality, so that you'll get the results of the generosity as a human being or as a god, that kind of thing. Anyway, it's talking about that kind of thing. If wisdom light, it carries on to say, if wisdom's light does not dispel the darkness of ignorance, one will not come to possess pure ethics. In the absence of wisdom, that discipline, in other words, that ethics discipline, same thing like morality, that morality will mostly be disturbed by afflictions through flawed understanding. I'm not quite sure how that would work. Morality disturbed by afflictions, then how would it be morality? I don't know. Excellent qualities of patience will remain in one's mind if it is disturbed by faults of Excellent qualities of patience will not remain in one's mind if it's disturbed by the faults of distorted wisdom. Nor will fame remain for a king without excellent qualities who hates to examine what is good and faulty. So one thing to keep in mind here is it's not just talking about the wisdom realizing emptiness, sort of like wisdom in general. And in fact, wisdom, you see, we usually translate this word sherab as wisdom, and wisdom is always a good thing, isn't it? However, the same word sherab. So there's like, for example, they talk about the view of the transitory correction. In other words, the mind which grasps at an I existing from its own side is described as a kind of wisdom. But wisdom is the wrong word in that case. It's a kind of intelligence, maybe. Because the thing is, the mind that thinks there is an I existing from its own side is not a stupid mind, right? It's actually a mind which is like very kind of like sharp in a way. It's wrong. There isn't an I existing from its own side, but that mind thinking that the I exists from its own side is kind of like sharp and awake. So it has certain characteristics that we associate with wisdom. So anyway, wisdom can be something quite bad. Well, anyway, this word sherab, it can be something good, it can be something bad, it can be something neutral. So in particular, even when it's a good one, so which means then it's perfectly reasonable to call it wisdom. There are different types of wisdom. We saw that earlier on in this thing about wisdom, where it talks about the wisdom the wisdom of the five, the types of knowledge, and so on. So when it says, the noble fame remain for a king without excellent qualities, who hates to examine what is good and faulty. So anyway, you've got a king, so they're in a powerful position, a wealthy position, but they don't have wisdom, so they do all sorts of stupid things. And then people, it's like they think it's being king is meaningless because you've got a king who does all kinds of stupid things. I'm sure this sounds familiar. It is extolled as sublime for the learned. There is nothing more subtle and deep. So when we talk about subtle and deep, I mean, you talk about emptiness being subtle. The point is the mind realizing it has to be a subtle mind, a profound mind. Profound mind understands the profound. There is nothing more subtle and deep. Without wisdom, the mind will not take the straight path, completely unobscured, obscured by the fault of desire. Anyway, when we have no wisdom, you make all kinds of mistakes. Even when you're doing something which looks good, you'll make mistakes, and then it just messes things up. Some believe wisdom's way does not involve effort. Their view will not become completely pure, so wisdom doesn't come effortlessly. As for a king's fame, here a king who lacks excellent qualities may find fame once, but it will degenerate and pass. Therefore it is necessary to generate wisdom. Its cause, hearing completely pure scriptures in accordance with one's mental capacity, set out in the Compendium of Perfection. So here you have these various verses. Yeah, I think we can get to the end of this section, because mostly it's just reading. It's pretty straightforward. So the Compendium of Perfection says, one who studies little is blind and does not know how to meditate. You might have heard in the Lamrim teachings, if you meditate without having studied, then it's like a person without arms trying to climb a mountain. It just doesn't work. Without that, what understanding would someone reflect on? So if you haven't studied, then what are you going to meditate on? So actually, there are some people in the monasteries. I remember hearing there were some Westerners travelled with their teacher to Sarah, and one of them was seen meditating. One of the Western students was seen meditating, and so it seems that the monks, because for them the big thing is studying, right? The main thing is they spend many years studying. And sometimes it's not balanced well, and holiness encourages them to be more balanced. In other words, they need to make sure that they don't just study, but they also meditate. And that's been, picking up more and more in the monasteries. So, what was I going to say? Yeah, so anyway. So what these monks were saying was, they haven't studied, so what are they meditating on? So this is quite true, of course. If you haven't studied, then what do you meditate on? What are you going to meditate on? But they were assuming that because they hadn't studied in the monasteries, then, they hadn't studied anything. That's studying means going to the monastery and doing all the debate. And it's true that they get an amazing education, and that the debate is an amazing way of learning. But they assume that they haven't been to Sarah, they haven't gone to debate, so they don't know anything. So then what they're meditating on? Of course, people get pretty amazing education also in the Western Dharma centers, even without learning Tibetan. So they just didn't know that. I'm not saying all the monks said that, but there were certain monks who said that.
Excuse me, Venerable, can I say something?
Yeah.
So I was involved for about 20 years with a Tibetan teacher, and then I went to, and then I did Vipassana retreats, and I came back and I said, why don't we do Vipassana to start with? Because we don't have any focus concentration. We don't have basic teachings. We just go into these tantric things that look like, wahoo. And so I was of the opinion that it was better for Westerners to start with meditating, the anapanasati, the breath work, just focusing on the breath to start with. And my teacher kind of dismissed it, but that's the feeling I had after I had experienced both.
Yeah.
Anyway, just an opinion.
No, but it's quite true. It's quite possible that for and actually I think there's no doubt that like what they do, what they seem to do, right? I mean, you can't speak for everybody, definitely. I mean, I've got one of my classmates. So I think he got as far as studying the Madhyamika, so the several years where you learn about emptiness according to Lama Tsongkhapa and Nagarjuna, Chantakirti, and all that. Then he completely went up into the mountains above Dharamsala. So at least what that means is that all along he knew that what he wanted to do was to go up into the mountains and meditate, but he waited for about, I don't know, 15 years to do that. 15 years, and I think that was a good thing to do. But generally speaking, for Westerners, I think it's really impossible to just study, and then after doing all your studies, then to go on to do the meditation. It doesn't work. And in fact, I've never seen any of the texts by the Tibetan masters and Indian masters that I've studied, which is not much, but anyway, the ones I have studied, nobody says that you should study for 15 years, then reflect for 15 years, then meditate for 15 years. They all say, I mean, there's this saying of what's his name, Dromtomba, the student of teacher, which goes something like, what I study, I also reflect on and meditate on. What I reflect on, I also study and meditate on. What I meditate on, I also study and reflect on. It's like this emphasis on the combination of the three. But also, those things like the Vipassana, which comes from another tradition, I think that your teacher was right to be, not to just, of course, let's do that kind of thing. One has to be very careful and examine very well. So from your side, you'd already examined it by actually getting experience from it, right? But for him to just take your word for it would have been ridiculous, really. He would have to get the experience. Okay, so a bit more, just a bit more. And I think what we can just read to the end and then maybe sort of touch on what happened in the end at the beginning the next class. So so one who studies little is blind and doesn't know how to meditate. Without that, what understanding would someone reflect on? So from the cause of putting effort into studying arises as a result the vast wisdom through meditation with reflection. So those three. Then Maitreya says in his Sublime Continuum, and this is something which is not, you have to know about the tenet systems to be able to understand what he's saying here partly. But anyway, so he says, conceptualization of the three spheres. So we know about the three spheres, generally speaking, it's like the object, action, and agent. So like with meditation, there's the mind that's meditating, there's the action of meditating, and then there's the object that it's meditating on. Those would be the three spheres. So conceptualization of the three spheres would be, particularly the ignorance grasping at those three as existing from their own side. So conceptualization of the three spheres would be that, and that's posited as the obstruction to omniscience. Conceptualizations like miserliness are posited as afflictive obstructions. So the obstructions to omniscience would be what mainly prevents you from achieving enlightenment. Afflictive obstructions would be what mainly prevents you from achieving liberation. There is no cause apart from wisdom that eliminates these. So either of those, if you want to get rid of them, you need wisdom. And therefore wisdom is supreme. Since study is its basis, study is supreme. Then the compendium of trainings in verse says you should be patient, you should pursue study, then you should retreat to a forest, strive at equipoise meditation. So I think maybe we will stop there. But this is interesting because we've come quite fresh from the perfection of patience, where it talks about three types of patience. Remember the third one. So you should be patient. That should mean something to us now, because the third kind of patience, I can't remember exactly how it went, but it was to do with there are certain things that we need to study and understand, and sometimes because they're difficult, we have a kind of anger arising, which needs to be opposed by, overcome by patience. Anger in the sense of like just like, do I really need to do this kind of thing? What I want is just some really simple meditation that's going to make me feel happy, make my mind peaceful, make my life meaningful. Then that can spread out to others, and that's good enough. Maybe I just need to recite Om Mani Padme Hum. Just recite Om Mani Padme Hum. Chin raised on the crown of my head. Chin raised on the crown of all sentient beings' head. Recite Om Mani Padme Hum. Imagine that I'm leading all the sentient beings in reciting Om Mani Padme Hum. Maybe not just myself, but of this life, but all my past lives. Reciting Om Mani Padme Hum. All sentient beings, their past lives. Reciting Om Mani Padme Hum. As I recite them Om Mani Padme Hum, so all of that's going on with Chinrezi Lama, who is His Holiness Dalai Lama, appearing in that form. Nectar and light, purifying, completely purifying everything. What else do I need? I'm trying to remember. I had this friend. It's very sad actually. He died quite young. Hepatitis. But anyway, he was a monk for several years and then disrobed, and I remember him telling me. Yeah, that's right. I think it was maybe the money wheel, the money wheel. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Money wheel, recite Om Mani Padme Hum. There was one other thing, I can't remember what it was now. So he says, what else do I need? So anyway, yeah, you should be patient, meaning you need to understand how important it is to understand those things, and therefore how important it is to learn and think and struggle to get the knowledge, because it's so important, and to cherish understanding those things, to cherish them and approach them with that kind of appreciation and cherishing and value, instead of what's the point kind of thing. You should be patient. So with that patience, now you've got that patience, now you need to pursue study, you need to study those things. Then retreat to a forest. So this implies, study them. Then once you've understood them, then you can retreat to a forest, strive at equipoise and when you go to the forest, strive at equipoise meditation. So I don't know about forest anyway. I heard that one I had certain lama I don't have a connection with, but I've got a friend who's gone to some teaching with him. He, the new Kalur Rinpoche. So apparently he said, what's the American word? But he was saying, rather than retreating, going into retreat in isolation somewhere, like up in the mountains or in the forest or whatever, get yourself a good condominium and do your retreat in that. I think that's true, actually, anyway. So you should be patient, pursue study, then go to your condominium and then strive at equipoise. Right. Okay, so let's stop there. Okay. So maybe next week we'll meet. Everybody will be in their condominium. But anyway, I think you've all got your condominium. Your equivalent of it, right? Always, you all look like, apart from Michael's there in a blur, but I'm sure he's got a nice place there, and Jannar, Sandy, and Irv, you've got a nice place. So that's your retreat place. That's the place to do your retreat, lifelong retreat. Anyway, what's the main retreat, right? Main retreat isn't physical isolation, is isolating your mind from the negative minds, right? So if you find a situation where where you feel some kind of peace, and where you feel like meditating, that's your retreat place, right? Then you can do the real retreat, to retreat from the negative minds. Okay, so let's stop there with a quick dedication. Maybe we don't need the prayers up on the screen. The essential dedication always, which covers everything, which is to dedicate all of this merit with all the merit of oneself and all others, of past, present, and future. So this includes all of the merit and virtue and stuff accumulated by all of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, especially our gurus, rejoicing in that, dedicating all that to the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and to all His Holiness's prayers, being actualized, coming true. And then think all that merit that we dedicate is, it all exists, but doesn't exist as it appears, completely empty of existing as it appears, completely unfindable. And likewise, the dedication itself, totally unfindable, completely non-existent in the way of appearing, and oneself, the one who's dedicating also. I exist, but not like I appear to exist. All completely empty. Okay, so thank you very much again. So we have another 4 classes. So that'll be nice, right? We have another 4 classes.
Oh, we do? I thought this was the last one of the series. So
I tell you something quite interesting happened, which is, I think there was a miscommunication, which is that I was just about to say after she died, she didn't die, she's still alive. After my
like
mum
in close.
After my mum came out of hospital and we decided to start up the class again, so I was thinking, okay, normally we've got into the habit of, generally speaking, aiming at 6 classes, and so then Diane, the SPC, suggested doing a few extra to make up for the ones that we missed. So I had it in mind, okay, yeah, so we're going to be doing 10 classes. So I've got in my mind that we're doing up until something like the 23rd or something like that of July, and she said, "Oh no, it finishes this Thursday." And I said, "Okay, whichever you want," but I said I'm okay to carry on. So she said, "Okay, carry on."
Okay, back in our saddles, back on.
What's that, Sandy?
Nothing was sent out to that effect. It was just, this was the ending date to extend for the time, that we'd missed, but nothing